13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age. Welcome back to 13 Questions. On this episode, we have Michael Mazzei. Michael Mazzei runs a podcast. It's with Mike and Maurice, mindescape.com. Phenomenal guys. Love the podcast. Encourage you all to listen. Darren sent me these guys over blind, and I got a chance to sit down and start listening to their work and was thoroughly impressed. Had a really awesome interview. I hope you guys enjoy it. I certainly know that me and Mike kind of hooked up here on the side and decided that we're going to do some podcasting together with our own personal shows. So all together a wonderful interview from my standpoint. I hope you guys enjoy. If you guys enjoy the show, head on over to 13questionspodcast.com. Take a look over there, see all the other available resources we have, the newsletter, the speech and writing courses, the communication courses by TJ Walker. And of course, if you want to hear the rest of the bonus questions, you can do that as well. Thank you guys so much for listening to us. I hope you thoroughly enjoy this episode. And if you do, well, I will see you next week. Until then. So, you ready to maybe dive into some 13 questions, Michael?
Yep, I am ready. I listened to a couple episodes. I listened to the Darren Grimes episode and another guy. I don't know his name, but yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, the thing that I found most surprising when doing this show is there's no bad interviews. You know, I've said it 1,000 times here, but everyone's passed down wisdom from their grandfathers, you know, those before them. And that's invaluable. And everybody has a piece of that. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a viewpoint on life that's incredibly poignant. And, you know, you just got to ask people about it. And this is a great format for that. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's a good idea for sure.
So joining us tonight is Michael Mazzei Jr. Michael, what was the best advice ever given to you? And would you modify it at all today?
The best advice is something that both of my parents would always say to me separately. I would say it's probably do what makes you happy. So, I mean, if you can find a way to make a living doing what makes you happy, or maybe that involves extracurricular passion project stuff, whether it be music or podcasts or whatever the case may be. Do what makes you happy. Life's short. And yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. And I don't think I would modify that. I think I'm still trying to obtain that happiness, which is difficult, but we're all searching for it.
Is that what drove you towards podcasting? Was that same drive?
No, that's something different. I would say what drove me to podcasting was the fact that I saw it as a new medium to have conversation, like interesting conversations with people that you wouldn't normally hear, that you wouldn't topics that you wouldn't normally talk about with other people. That and the lack of information and true knowledge and that kind of stuff. I don't think that there's enough of that out there. Even when people talk about, we talk about a lot about esoteric subjects and stuff like that. Even within those realms, there's a lot of people talking about nonsense and misinformation and not really looking at things objectively. So that's kind of why we started the podcast. But it does make me happy. It's definitely a creative outlet. But as a musician, it was kind of filling the hole of playing in bands and stuff like that, which I took a step back from just because there was so much politics and drama and all sorts of stuff involved, obviously, with being in bands and the music scene and stuff like that. So that's why I decided to kind of get rid of that. It was just eating away at me. So this is kind of what I funneled all that creative energy into.
Nice. What was the most important lesson you learned from your parents?
Um, so my parents were married when they were 19 and had me when they were 20. And they got divorced when I was probably 12 or 13. I would say the biggest lesson was wait till you get married until you find your the love of your life or some semblance of that, because I saw what happened with their relationship. So I just told myself in the back of my head I was never going to get married until I was in my 30s and was mature and understood what I wanted, because I've been 3 or 4 different people since I was 19. So I can't imagine people getting married at that age, or unless you're like high school sweethearts and it's just perfect. I think that's probably pretty hard to keep up with. So,
Is that something that you've managed to push forward into your life now? Are you like
oh
on
yeah,
track?
yeah.
Like you've
I'm happily married. We've been married for like a year and a half, and yeah, she's the love of my life, and I don't have any issues in terms of stuff I see normal people fight about and talk about and stuff like that. I mean, everybody's got their own issues, but it's different. And I knew what I wanted out of a relationship, and I knew what I didn't want, and I'm glad that I was able to find what I did want. So,
Wow, that's very disciplined. Yeah, I mean, as much as people talk about wanting to plan families and those like giant tracks of life of like when you're going to get married, so few people seem to really follow through on it.
oh yeah, I mean, because well, life happens too. You meet somebody, or I think some people get caught up in um, life too, and sometimes it's easy. Maybe you work with somebody, or maybe you're just super attracted to them, or maybe but that doesn't always
Mhm.
equate to, are we going to be able to deal with the
Yeah.
hard times together and stuff like that. I think that's when you figure out who you're supposed to be with, is can you get through the hard times, can you get through the downslope of things, and if you can, I think that's somebody to hold on to. So
Yeah, you just got me thinking, and it's off topic, but you know, with the modern life of going to a job, I mean, that's your family. You see your workmates sometimes more than your family, and it's only a select group. It's not like it used to be where it could be the village or a town, and we didn't have this, such structured 9 to 5s, and you lived closer just because travel was so hard. That really does kind of change the entire dynamic of who you might find. So it's probably a lot harder to find that perfect person for you when you're just not surrounded in a group and able to see all the facets of those people and see just more people.
oh, absolutely. And I mean, nowadays you have the internet, so you literally have people on there swiping right. I don't even know, because I had been in a relationship since all this swiping
Hmm.
left and right and all that stuff started. But um, people can literally go on there. It's like buying a shirt on Amazon. Oh, that looks great. I'll take that. And I think some people are fooling themselves these days into thinking that you can just meet somebody on the internet and it's going to work out perfectly. The chances of that are probably less of a chance than, let's say, going to do something you're passionate about in real life and then meeting somebody doing that, if that
Right.
makes
Well,
sense.
absolutely. Everybody wants a sofa that's going to last them a lifetime, but we still all buy IKEA furniture. So,
Right.
you're going to do the dating game the same. It's easy throwaway.
Sure.
What book has been most influential on your life and why?
So there's a couple different books at a couple different points that I would say are equally influential. But if I were to pick one book that started this whole thing off of me being curious, me looking for something more in life, me looking for purpose and stuff like that. In high school, we were a little bit ahead of our time, but me and the co-host of my podcast, who's my cousin Maurice, we both decided to read Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe when we were
Nice.
probably, I think, 15 years old. In high school, we had a literature class where we could pick books that we wanted to read, which back then was kind of interesting because they kind of just forced you to read certain things. But yeah, we were able to pick some books. We picked that one. And there's always been this. this interest with psychedelics with me specifically, the idea that there's this mystical dimension that you can enter into at a moment's notice and alter your consciousness. And whether you're really going somewhere else or not, I think that's besides the point. It's the ability to alter your consciousness and walk around, and day-to-day life has always fascinated me, as opposed to all other altered states, which would be, lucid dreaming or dreaming, meditation, near-death experiences, just stuff like all those other things require you to either be focused or not conscious in the way that we would, we would say day-to-day consciousness. But again, psychedelics has the ability to allow you to interact with the world around you without, you're there, you're present. So that's always fascinated me, is that ability to do that. And also that whole counterculture movement with what was going on at the time, Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters. And we've always been super into the Grateful Dead and jam bands, and they've been a huge influence on us as musicians as well. So I would say that whole realm of what was going on, we were reading, again, Electric Kool-Aid Estes, all of Hunter S. Thompson stuff. We were really getting into that whole counterculture stuff of the time and all the psychedelic literature.
Well, it's amazing that it's so shunned in culture when you think about, we know that there's a connection between DMT and dreams. It seems to be that's what happens when you go into a dream state. People pull back things from dreams that are either precognition or, ideas, for just things that they bring into the world. The same thing with daydreaming, meditation, lucid dreaming, psychedelics. There's so many people that have come forward and said, yeah, I went into this state and these ideas came to me. And then you can even take it forward into all the natural states we have and the artist and the muse. And you start to go, why are we so fearful of these things that seem to give us access to ideas that when we have them, we pull them into this world and it's real change. I mean, people forget that this is a magical world. Your phone was a thought in somebody's head at one point in time, and now look at it. The flying.
And the guy that created your phone, again, used a lot of LSD and was a big fan of Eastern mysticism. Steve Jobs. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's magic to me. I heard Duncan Trussell doing a bit about it, where he talks about being able to extract, gold from human beings, that you amalgamate the earth into these metals and these machineries that create these planes that drop bombs and, just mince these people into meat. And in return, you get gold. And when you think about it in that way, like, our physical world is a manifestation of just magic from the mind. Anyways, I'm digressing here. Sorry.
No, you're fine. And I'll just point out that it's not for sure proven that DMT occurs endogenously during dream states. It's speculation. I think there's no way to really confirm that. They probably have to let somebody that's alive would probably have to let them get in there and extract.
You're right. I think they've only proven it in mice, because obviously you can probe during.
Right. Well, that, and the other thing I was going to say is there was a study that came out last year from the University of Michigan where they proved that DMT was occurring endogenously throughout the whole brain of a mice that was induced into cardiac arrest.
Wow.
So that's something I've been interested in lately. And psychonauts are kind of interesting because in one realm they're very open-minded and let's figure out what's going on here. And then in the other realm they're very closed-minded. They don't want to hear things that they don't. So if you were to equate near-death experiences to the DMT realm, while I was looking for somebody to interview for our podcast that had experienced both near-death experience and DMT experience, there was a lot of people like, oh, they're nothing alike. They're nothing alike. But all the science is starting to suggest the opposite, that there may be some aspect of it, whether it's specifically correlated to cardiac arrest or just your body shutting down in general. there's evidence to suggest that there is some sort of correlation there, whether it's some chemical gateway or just an endogenous chemical release. We don't know.
Or
So.
even it could be the mechanisms behind, the strange things in the world. So one of the things I find most fascinating about Whitley Strieber in his connection with alien, I don't know how to put this, contact with beings, people who believe that they're being abducted or have seen aliens, but that there's also in that same realm of like their experience, it's very similar to the death, or when somebody sees a dead relative or has a ghost experience. And then you start taking all these different, UFOs, ghosts, poltergeists, and these things, and they all have this common thread. And I see so many things in the world, including psychedelics, that they all have these common threads through them. And I just find it interesting that the more that we get connected in this internet world, the more that we're able to see just how things really are connected.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what our podcast focuses on, is the fringe for the most part. We did an episode yesterday on ancient Greece and the sophists. So we do academic stuff too, and we do fringe stuff. But starting the podcast, I thought that this fringe was a lot bigger. And I say this on the podcast a lot, but when we first started the podcast, this fringe was a lot bigger. There was a lot more room, and I guess I was a lot more open-minded to certain topics. But through doing the podcast and researching things and talking to experts and talking to researchers, talking to authors that we interview, this fringe is a lot thinner than I initially thought, but it is there. It does exist, and there are not answers for a lot of things, but it is a smaller window than I once thought from doing this process. So,
yeah, you're probably like me. I've been in, the paranormal weeds from a kid, whether it be unsolved mysteries, sightings, X-Files, all the UFO videos and documentaries that you could suck down. And then we have, the Navy releasing video of the Nimitz and us creating a space force. And so when you look at it from that perspective of it being the complete giggle factor to actually becoming a forefront of consciousness, I think that these things with the Randall Carlsons and people who have extreme amounts of evidence building behind them, that, the ideologies, although they seem like they're pillars now, they're starting to fall all over.
Sure. Well, there's even, and I don't want to go too far off topic, but even recently I've been noticing on Twitter and other social media formats, you have real archaeologists fighting back, saying things like, if you believe, and I personally don't believe aliens built anything on this planet, but let's say I do like watching Ancient Aliens. It's entertaining, and I like looking at all the megalithic structures. But there's a lot of archaeologists fighting back right now saying Ancient Aliens is racist, because their premise is that if we're not giving credit to the indigenous peoples that actually did build these things, we're saying that they needed help from above or whatever, which is just complete BS. What they want is to control the narrative, and they're not good at media and talking and getting their information out there. So they're poo-pooing, TV shows and stuff that doesn't align with what they think. And then the other point I wanted to make on that is that you also have these same archaeologists calling people like Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock and all these people pseudo-archaeologists, which they're not claiming to even be archaeologists to begin with. They're just claiming to have an extreme amount of data on a certain topic that they've researched pretty intensely. So that's the kind of culture war that's going on right now. You have all these scientists and archaeologists and anthropologists that are trying to fight back, but they're not good at public relations, and they're not good at talking, and they're not good at podcasting. So they're going to have a very tough time if they're going to keep that attitude up. That's just
especially with the Randall Carlson and the Graham Hancock mix. Those guys are very quick in the tongue, fast in the mind, and you are not going to undermine them when it comes to knowledge, as long as they have absolute knowledge on it. And here's the thing. Everybody thinks they're an expert because they've read the history and they believe in it. And all these guys do is go, look, this is wrong and I can prove it. Here's why. Nobody wants to believe that they could, and the here's why. So they jump to the conclusion. And until people do, they can. Well, look, cataclysm is real, and it's every 12,000 years.
Yeah, I don't know why that's even being fought, that there could be a near Earth object that could do some damage. I don't even know why that should be the first thing that we think about, because that's the only thing we really can't control at this point.
Well, it's a weird world we live in. You have, Pluto being delisted as a planet, and then we would have found the 10th planet, which would have been like all the prophecies had foretold, this new planet, now number 9 out there. And I always found that interesting that, by them knocking that out, because if they didn't do that, it would be like, wow, look, the ancients said there was a 10th planet, and here it is.
Well, we know for sure that there's something tugging on the orbit of Neptune and Uranus, so they haven't discovered what that body
Absolutely,
is yet.
You're right. It is a complete postulation. However, we shall see. I think they're saying that within the next 10 years they should be able to narrow the field with all of the instruments they have, but it's just if you don't know where to look, it takes a long time.
Well, yeah, it's amazing that they know that, but they're willing to just shut down all other ideas about possible life in other parts of the universe. So
yeah.
We haven't even left our solar system, so we haven't even left past the moon. So,
what daily habits or rituals do you have?
So that's an interesting one, and I'm just going to start off by saying I the only habits I have that are consistent every day are eating, sleeping, and taking in knowledge. I don't wake up at the same time every day. I don't go to bed at the same time every day. I don't have the same times I eat meals every day. I'm kind of weird like that. I've always been weird like that. I almost dread living that life. And it's kind of weird, but I look at people that wake up at 5:30 every day or 6:30 every day and do the same shit every day, as like, I don't want to live that way. That's never been appealing to me. And I'm not saying be a basket case and come and go as you please, but I try and structure my life as being able to be in flux. So if I'm at work, I'm at work and I'm doing work, but if I'm at home, I'm never doing the same thing. So it just depends.
Well, that makes sense. Monotony can get dull, and some people like that military structure, 3 square meals a day, but yeah, I feel that calling too.
I just always felt like if I were to go structure my life like that, I would be 30 one day and then wake up 50 the next. I just feel like it would just lead you down a road of you wake up one day and you've lost 20 years. And I have my own issues with time and losing time with my own stuff, but that specifically, for some reason, that's always how I've felt about that subject. So,
if I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
So it correlates to the last one, which would be time management, being late. For some reason, I'm always 5, 10, 15 minutes late. I think the one you did with Darren Grimes, he said the same thing, and when I was listening to it, I'm like, that's exactly me. I don't know what it is. It's interesting. When I was younger, my dad was always in real estate. So being in real estate, which I do on the side now, you're always coming and going from appointments. There's no real 100% time. Like, you're showing a house, if you have to get to the next appointment and you're running 15 minutes. So there's always this like window where you're running a little bit late. So when I was younger, my dad would always be running a little bit late to take me to hockey, take me to baseball or whatever. And it would always infuriate me. But then when I got older, I realized, it's a lot harder to be on time than one would think in terms of that kind of stuff when you're in an industry like that and when you're running around all over town. So I would say that that's probably my biggest flaw when it comes to that, and it's carried over to other parts of my life too. So something I work on, but it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's I think that's a struggle a lot of people have, being able to get get themselves completely in gear for something. And
even things I love, it's just part of who I am now. And I'm trying to fix it. But again, it's just one of those things where, you don't want to beat yourself up too much over it, but you want to work on it. It's just trying to find that medium.
what are you most curious about?
So I'd say curiosity is probably what drives me as a person. So I'm curious about a lot of stuff. The thing I'm most curious about is kind of this little tangled web of things like epistemology, the theory of knowledge. How do we know what we know? Teleology, the study of purpose. Is there a purpose? Ontology, the study of being. What are we? Who are we? What are we doing here? And then consciousness. What is consciousness? Is it fundamental in the universe? Is it something that arrives from biology? Those kinds of things. And then are we alone? I think that those are the top things that I think about on a regular basis. Are we alone? Meaning, is there life out there? Is there intelligent life out there? Are we being visited now? You mentioned the Nimitz, the USS Nimitz videos, the Go Fast, the Gimbal, and the Tic Tac videos. And then you've got Colonel David Fravor's experience and sightings and stuff like that. So it's just, those are the things I think about regularly is who are we? Why are we here? As you mentioned, we're living, breathing magic, if you will, and we're created from stardust, but we walk around every day pretending that this is all normal. So I guess that's what I think about on a day-to-day basis.
I love it. I absolutely love that. There's so many people that don't concentrate on those other aspects. They've been just hoodwinked into scientism and thinking that that is the only way and the only way it can be. And yeah, they don't get that. Yeah, even if you go to different cultures like Japan, their science community has a whole different view on physics and what's going on than you have in America. So, yeah.
Oh, I love science too, but it's one of those things where I love it for what it is. And I'm not gonna. What you're mentioning is kind of this dogma of the day, which is you're taught in school, whatever you learned in physics class or whatever you learned in math class, or I guess math is more empirical, but science is up for interpretation in terms of what's what. And if anybody out there listening, I highly recommend reading Thomas Kuhn's I forget the exact title, but it's about scientific revelations and paradigm shifts. I'm drawing blank on the name right now, but that book specifically talks about how we're always wrong. Like right now we're wrong. And 100 years from now, we're going to be wrong. And 1,000 years from now, we're going to look like idiots. So knowing that, what we know today is not going to be right tomorrow, but this idea that science is right, well, it's not. What happens is, in Thomas Kuhn's model, is that there's a buildup of evidence, and slowly over time, this evidence builds up more and more and more and more, and then proves some sort of a paradigm shift happening. And then through that paradigm shift, it leads to a scientific revolution, which is just blowing everybody's mind. So it would be equivalent to Einstein or going back to Isaac Newton or somebody along those lines. So that's what fascinates me, is this idea that we're all preaching, oh, we've got all the answers. We know how the universe works. We know how technology works. You don't. Nobody does. I mean, unless you invented the iPhone or build them. If I were to just drop an iPhone in 25 years ago in your bedroom, would you be able to take the thing apart, understand how it worked? No, you wouldn't, and most people don't. So
yeah, we don't fully understand the electron, but guess what? We're still utilizing it every day. It's how we're having this conversation.
Right.
I always see science as being this, like, you're telling a story. Here's a reality, and you're laying out a map. You're drawing a roadmap of it, but you're never going to be perfect. So each new iteration is just a different way of describing something, and in some ways you're going to be right, in some ways you're going to be wrong. So that's kind of how it's funny. I see religion in the same way. That, these are just ways to filter your mind to understand the experience that you're having and seeing. That's really all science is. And as you change the filter, you're going to see it differently.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that you're pretty spot on with that, but I also think that I think that's why you see a lot of people interested in extraterrestrials and spirituality and all this crystal stuff. And I mean, look, you believe in what you want, but at the end of the day, what's happening is people are falling out of the religion or the I don't even know what it's they're falling out of, they're losing their spirituality or their spirit, I feel like, in these modern times. So what you have is these people going to these other subjects like, oh, extraterrestrials. Well, that could explain everything that happened in the Bible, or it could explain a lot of the mystical things that have happened that people have recorded over time. And I'm not saying that that isn't the case. Maybe it's the case. I don't think that that's the case, but I'm open to the idea of that. However, I just think that we're all searching for this. We're searching for answers, again, which you mentioned at the beginning of the question: epistemology, teleology, ontology. I think that people subconsciously do interact with these subjects from time to time. They want to believe in something, but they don't know what to believe in. And I think that's, again, why you see people interested in UFOs and this spiritual movement with all these gurus and crystals and all that kind of stuff, even psychedelics to some extent. It's popular now, and there's a mystical element associated with it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that we're in this weird transition between being religious creatures and realizing we don't need religion to be personally spiritual. And I think that's what kind of a lot of people are figuring out right now.
Yeah, we're kind of unfocused spiritual creatures. We've lost our way.
Oh, and I wanted to the name of that book is The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. So everybody check that book out.
Sounds good. I'm going to add it to my reading list.
Definitely worth it.
What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
I'm trying to think. That's a good question. I think, well, I'll pick this. Okay, so in high school, me and two buddies went out during lunchtime on our campus of our high school, and we're smoking a couple joints. And we used to have these security guards that wouldn't let you out of the parking lot. We were allowed to leave campus to go to lunch, but you had to leave via your car. And I think this was freshman year, end of freshman year maybe. And we were smoking a couple joints, and the rent-a-cops that used to be in the parking lot would come, and they caught us, but they thought that we were smoking cigarettes. So we were taken to the principal's office. At that time, I was on the football team. I was a starting offensive tackle, and I got in a lot of trouble through the sports teams. We had to sign some stupid. Have you ever seen what's that movie called? With Wooderson, and I'm completely drawing a blank on the name right now. What did you say?
I said I don't think so, but I'm not much for a sports movies.
It's not a sport. It's I can't believe I'm forgetting the name. Anyways, in the movie they make the kids who are all partying. It's the last day of school for the summer, and they're going all out to party and stuff, and they want the guy to sign the contract to be, they're in high school, no drugs, no drinking, that kind of thing. So we were all forced to sign those documents when I was in high school, and I signed it stupidly, and I got part of the season taken away. I got suspended for 20% of the season in football, and then that carried over. So when I was actually a really good baseball player too, I was a really good pitcher, and when it came time for baseball season, the coach was a total douchebag and knew that I got in trouble for that, and ended up cutting me from the baseball team, even though I was one of the better pitchers. So that kind of was a terrible thing. Oh, the movie, the movie I'm trying to think about is Dazed and Confused.
Oh, of course I've
Yeah.
seen it. Yes.
So Randall, Pink Floyd's being forced to sign the paper saying that he's gonna not drink and smoke and hang out with the idiots anymore, and he crumples it up and throws it in his coach's face, which is probably what I should have done. Um, but so the most embarrassing part about that though wasn't getting caught. It wasn't all that. It was actually my dad, who's a busy person who was living in a different city at the time, had come into town to see me play football, and I was suspended, and I never ended up telling him because my parents were divorced, and I didn't want to get in more trouble at the time than explaining the situation to my dad. So I would say that that's probably the most embarrassing. So
Wow. Well, did that teach you anything at least about handling contracts and getting screwed over at a young age?
Yeah, I mean that's what I do on this. As a podcaster, you don't deal much with contracts, but my business life, yeah, I deal with a lot of contracts. But at the same time, the more of what I learned from that wasn't even the contract thing. What it was is, don't be an idiot. And since then, I haven't put myself in position to be in trouble with my parents or the law or whatever. I just have never put myself in that position again. So,
what is your greatest fear, and how did you overcome it?
I think that's something that evolves. It used to be death. I'd say right now it's a fear of failure, and I haven't overcome it. I'm still trying to overcome it and figure it out. I'd say it's probably a work in progress. So, yeah, I'd say it's a fear of failure.
Well, that's guess if you take the mindset that the only way to overcome your fears is to like embrace them. That's an odd one.
Yeah, that is, it's I think it's more about just being afraid of putting yourself out there and failing is more of what it is.
Right.
You're doing a podcast. We do a podcast. I think putting yourself out there like that is not an easy. I remember doing episodes like, am I sure I want to talk about this? And then we can swear on this podcast, right?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Okay. So I remember we were going to do an episode. We were going to interview this guy who we've had on the show a few times, Dick Kahn, who's an author of DMT and My Occult Mind. He just came out with a second edition. And I remember because I am part of the business world and different things, but am I going to want to put this out there and let everybody I know into this part of my life where I am interested in psychedelics and weird things and weird topics? So I remember thinking twice about that. And then I'm just like, fuck it. I don't give a fuck. I'm just going to be myself on here. What I find interesting is what the situation is, and people can either deal with it or not. I don't give a shit anymore. So, but that was something that the first 20 episodes, I really thought hard about not saying certain things, and then got to a certain point, I'm like, what am I doing here? I just got to be true to myself and put myself out there. So again, fear of failure, it's not just having to do with the podcast, but life too. I think we're all afraid of being our true selves and putting ourselves out there, and then having to live with where the chips fall, whether good or bad.
Social media culture, cancel culture. I mean, of course, you have to be fearful, or at least mindful that it's there, because if you are honest and open, somebody is going to react to you because you're bound to cross a quote unquote social norm.
100%. I don't give a shit like that. In terms of, I'm not a bad person. I don't speak ill of other people. I might criticize people from time to time, but I don't judge people, and I don't, I think if, the cancel culture thing were to come after us, it would be weird because we don't do anything controversial. We're specifically putting information out there. And this is, our podcast is based on our own, I guess it's more of my own path of enlightenment. And then these are the topics and the things that I find interesting. And we don't talk about controversial things. We we talk about controversial things, but in the realm of what's what, if that makes sense, in terms of like ancient knowledge and stuff like that. It has nothing to do with political correctness or I could give a shit about all that in terms of I don't focus on that and I don't talk about that kind of stuff. So I'm not worried about any of that.
Well, the beautiful thing is there's other podcasters and people out there that are able to make money just based on word of mouth, listeners, donations, to the point that, hey, if you have a podcast and you have a stream, you're on Libsyn, you're not getting shut down from there. You're going to get delisted from, being able to get found. But if your information is touching enough people and they're sharing it organically, USB drive to your friend to friend, it doesn't have to be through the big conglomerate media. There's people growing and making a living because, hey man, yeah, they shut down my Patreon account, but guess what? I got a P.O. box. You want to send me a check? If you want to send a donation, heck, send me a gift card to Applebee's,
No, that's great. And I think that's, look, I know it's different all over the world, but in America, it's freedom of speech, and I'm all for freedom of speech. If you want to say something dumb and you want to live with the consequences, I'm fine with that. Yep. I don't have a problem with it. I think Joe Rogan says it all the time. It's to fight bad speech, you just have to show people it's better to have more good speech. So I think that's we've taken this weird turn where instead of letting people decide what's good and bad, it's the government or it's these groups or these different subsets of culture that want to decide what's good and bad, what should be censored, what should be not said, those kinds of things, as opposed to just saying, let people say it. And if it comes out and it sounds terrible and people hate it, well, then there's your answer.
Yeah, it's the most fascinating aspect is when you see people that are banned from speaking at a university because of a controversial topic. And it's like, all right, well, let their words stand on their own. If they are flawed, let them speak them. If you find, you're always going to find something positive or a different point of view in something somebody else has. You can always bring something out from it. There's always a takeaway. And just to shut somebody else down, you're never going to increase your standpoint because it's not going to be criticized. You're not going to see where you might have flaws, where you might be wrong. And until you're challenged. So that's what drives me nuts about that stuff. It's like, well, when you won't even listen to something, then we're just lost. It's everything you have is just going to be, completely just undiluted one point of view.
Yeah. I mean, Socrates and Plato are rolling over their graves right now. They're like, we created dialect and dialogue for a reason, and people just want to shut each other down without hearing their opinions. And then I think if you were truly an intelligent person, if you truly are an intelligent person and you truly have a grasp on consciousness and understanding people and trying to have a real conversation driving at true knowledge, you will A, listen to the person, and B, if you disagree with them, you'll disagree with them civilly, but you'll also point out your point of view or shed light on your point of view where maybe it turns that person around a little bit and helps them understand where you're coming from. I think that's what's being lost here is this. It's not only just agree to disagree, but if you disagree, at least still try and understand where that person's coming from. And we don't have any of that right now. So I think that's probably the biggest problem I see with people on TV and all the talking heads and stuff.
The beautiful thing about podcasts is that you have long format places for people. And I'll give an example. Lance Armstrong going on Joe Rogan. Here's a completely different perspective that you haven't heard because you were only given what was in the media. Here's it from the guy's own mouth in long format. So you can hear the entire nuanced conversation, not, he did it, he lied about it, sued somebody over it, he's a dick.
Right.
It's a much more complicated and nuanced story. And when you hear it from his perspective, then you understand. You might not agree with him. You don't have to like the guy, but you see the full story. It cuts through the media, and it's beautiful because if you get portrayed in the media in some way, hey, you can just make a podcast. $5 and you're hosting somewhere. Get a free Squarespace account. You're ready to go. And you can put your voice out there. And at least if people are interested in hearing your story, they can. As where, the old media, I mean, good luck. You were in a 15-second soundbite, maybe a minute clip, and that's it. That was your voice.
No, absolutely. I just don't think shutting anybody down leads to any kind of knowledge. That's I guess I'll just
Yeah.
you know I'll just break it down to that. So,
What quality do you most admire in a man and why?
hmm. I'm gonna say creativity, and I guess the reason why is because I've had a lot of different hats as far um, as doing different jobs and different topics and stuff like that. I think that creativity is one of those things where if you're truly creative, meaning that you are an original person and what you're, whether it's music or podcasting or um, you're an artist or filmmaker, whatever it is, I recognize creative, like as a creative person, I recognize creativity and I know how hard it is to truly create something original, especially as a musician. I can't tell you how many times I would write a song, like that's already a song. I mean, I've written a couple songs before where I'll play it and then I'll let like my cousin listen to it and be like, dude, that's a Fish song. Like, what do you just wrote a Fish song? So it's one of those things where creativity is so hard to obtain in the sense of truly being original that when I see it, I recognize it and I applaud it. So I guess that would probably be my answer to that.
I like it. Yeah, that is a very interesting fine line. I think of science being discovered in more than one place at the same time. You know, flight in France and flight in America happening so close that it's still debated on who the first person to fly was.
Mm-hmm.
And, you mentioned it, your friend writing a Fish song, is it because you heard the notes or is it because there's something in the nature of creativity that this is kind of like a baseline? This is a base thing to pull from. And there's some people out there that just, they manage to start pulling things out that nobody's ever seen before.
Well, and that's an interesting point. So I guess what I was saying with the writing the Fish song thing, it's not okay. So one of my biggest influences as a guitar player when I was really into it was Trey Anastasio from Fish. And so it's hard to play music and not have some of that in me since that's what
Yeah.
inspired me to do it. So when you look at the history of culture and society, we're all just getting ideas from one another. We're all just this amalgamation of information and traditions and all these different things. So I think that when you're talking about creativity, even if you're original, it still
Yeah.
probably is influenced by something or comes from somewhere. So I think to truly get beyond that, and again, we mentioned psychedelics earlier. I've had some psychedelic
Mm.
experiences where I've thought original thoughts that I know that I've never heard before, and I'm into a lot of different subjects. So I think that mind altering states, whatever it may be, I think can help people get to this place where they are coming up with original ideas. And it's no mistake that visionary thinkers and visionary people experiment with psychedelics, they meditate, they do all these things because it helps you achieve this clarity where you're not being influenced by a lot of other things.
Yeah, I've always wondered if that's the big lie in deception. It's because you are powerful, people are powerful, and this is kind of I don't want to call it like a steroid, but it's a jump start. It's a way for people to instantly start to see how powerful they are and enact it.
Mm.
Anyways, who were and are your role models and why?
Mm, I'd say there's a few. In terms of who has had an influence on me as a person, I definitely have to say my parents, even though they're divorced, and then also I'd say both of my step parents. Um, so having two sets of parents, both a stepdad, a stepmom, and also obviously my birth parents, I think that little structure and everybody being somewhat on good terms, I think was definitely helpful. And then from a creative standpoint, as I mentioned the question before, Trey Anastasio from Fish, from like a creativity standpoint, and it's always evolving, but and some people say, oh, Trey, say, he ran into some drug problems. But I think for me, I've always been able to separate creativity and those kinds of things from people's personal lives when you're talking about role models, because I think role models can be a weird thing. It's who influences you as a person, but then it's like who influences part of who you are. So it's this weird, even though those sound like the same thing, I don't think they are. I think that your parents influence you to a certain point. And I know people have different backgrounds and traditional, non-traditional, and different scenarios, but I think that whoever's raising you has a profound effect on your morals and ethics and things like that. But I think that when it comes to other parts of your personality, creativity, and different things like that, I think that you have to look elsewhere. I don't know many people that have gained creative inspiration from their parents, if that makes sense.
It does. What institution of society or structural aspect of modern life would you change given the chance?
I'm going to say school, specifically college, maybe even high school. I don't think a productive way of teaching individuals is to sit 30 or 40 people down in a room and give them the same talking points and information, and then expecting them to have mastered that information. And even once they do, what does that even mean? You just taught them something that again, we talked about this earlier, it's not going to be true 100 years from now, and it's not taught that way. So I think that I have a problem with the way they teach in school, in the sense that the things that they're teaching you are supposedly empirical at the time. So you believe it, you take every word in. This is how it is. Again, there's certain things that are that way. Math is a very empirical thing. It's very hard to argue with with numbers. But when it comes to things like science and history and whatever it is, otherwise, you run into these interesting things where it's like, no, this isn't the case, or 10 years ago that wasn't the case. I mean, I brought it up on the podcast, but it's when we were in high school, we graduated in, I don't know, 2003, 2004. I was very into like history and archaeology and that kind of stuff. They never taught us anything about like Göbekli Tepe and a lot of the megalithic structures, how they were built, who built them, those kinds of things. And not just those topics, but topics like that. And at the time, Göbekli Tepe had already been discovered. So if I'm taking an archaeology class and I'm in high school, I would expect that whatever the newest, coolest, most interesting thing that's been discovered would be talked about. And so I guess my problem with school was always they're teaching you general information, and the stuff you learn in first grade is just magnified into second grade and then third grade, and you're just building on top of things that you already know, just going deeper and deeper into detail, as opposed to and I don't know what the answer is, to be honest with you, but I guess that would be something that I would try and figure out, would be how can we teach kids to think critically and not just to take what's being told to them as fact.
Well, yeah, it's been turned into just learning things and having to pass tests, which, right. I mean, guess what? We're in a unique perspective because we went to school when there was still computers and the internet. You know, if you had a question, you had to go to the library or find somebody who knew that knowledge. Now, I've learned way, way, way more than I ever have in my schooling and ever could, because there's way more out there. I can track it down. I can dive into the things that I'm interested in, not forced to, eat things that I can't stand. And so I always look at it from, hey, man, from an education standpoint, people might be doing terrible, but from an overall knowledge standpoint, for the people that are utilizing it in the right direction, not just going on Snapchat and, social media all day long, the people who seek knowledge outside of that, they're in a way better position than we could have ever been. Because even though there's so much BS online, there's also way more good information online that was lock and key held, that you would have to go to schooling, go to university, have some privileged position to have access to. And now it seems restrictive, but I think we're in a much better, point from an information standpoint.
Yeah, and again, it's like a perception game too, because you think of teachers and your teacher like, oh, this is the authority. This person knows it all. They don't. They're just people. Even professors that have doctorates and tenures and all these things, they're just people that have been doing it longer. So yeah, they might have a better idea on some topics, but they're just people.
Mm-hmm.
They're you and me with an extra couple years of school on a specific topic. That doesn't make them right. It just makes them more knowledgeable in that specific subject. So I guess my problem was always is just the narrative, this idea of uniformitarianism, and everything's this church of progression, as John Anthony West would say, and this idea that everything's moving in this linear timeline forward, and that's not the case. There's been golden eras. There's been the dark ages. There's all these ups and downs and different weird things throughout history. And I think that what teachers do sometimes, and I've had some good teachers, there was a couple that were very helpful, but then there's other ones that it's just like, what are we doing here? This is just a job. And we just talked about this on our last episode where we talked about ancient Greece and the Sophists. And the Sophists were the opposition to the philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And the Sophists were tutors and academics that would teach like children of rich people and powerful people how to win arguments using rhetoric and certain types of speech. And they would teach them things like mathematics and then like natural sciences, but it wasn't to teach them for them to get at true knowledge. It was to teach them so that they would basically be able to be deceptive to win arguments and debates and stuff like that. So that's kind of where we're at, where we're just being taught to win arguments and debates. And you see it all over Twitter and social media, just people fighting back and forth about stupid stuff.
You think it's going to be getting better from now on?
No. I want better by what? Better by the masses or better?
Yeah, I guess, do you think it's going to be something that in time is going to like ebb away, or is this something that it's just going to become a deeper part of our culture? Because I wonder if, people are just, because right now the left, the proverbial left and the right are so big, and there's so many people that are seeing, the BS in the news and the other sides of view, that I wonder how long it's going to be before everybody just kind of is fed up with the entire system. Not that they abandon it, but at least see it for what it is.
I think, I think politics is it might be part of it, but it's not the whole picture. I think the reason why we're at where we're at, in my opinion, is the internet. We're like, this is new still, and people are trying to figure it out. I mean, even though it's been around for a while, this fast-paced back and forth is somewhat of a new thing, because internet speeds have gotten better. There's more and more social media platforms now. And this idea to open up a comment section on something, so anybody from anywhere all over the world can comment on something. I think that what we're seeing is we don't like to hear people's opinions as much as we thought we did, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
Like we don't want to hear what people have to say as much as we thought we would before. Because before, I think the perception before the internet was, I think this way, therefore these people across the world must think something similar. Maybe not the same thing, but something along those lines. And now we're starting to realize with the internet, there's so many different types of thinkers out there with so many different niches and minute things and quirks and in different things that it's hard to keep up with everything, number one, and it's hard to keep everything straight in terms of what's what. So I think that we're still in this like growing pains phase of what's going on with the internet, and I think that has trickled into politics and all sorts of different topics.
What is the most courageous thing you have ever done in your life or seen?
I would say the way that, well, there's a couple things from like a I would say probably how my mom had aggressive form of breast cancer that she was able to catch early. But I would say the most courageous thing is the way that I watched her battle that. I never saw her like cry or feel bad for herself or anything like that. And since she carried that attitude and was very positive, she was able to um she's able to get. I mean, I don't want to say she doesn't have it anymore, but I mean, there's that um, weird period between are you in remission or not. That's kind of where she is, where it's gone clinically, but you just have to wait it out for a while and see, make sure it doesn't come back and stuff. But I would say the way she handled that, if you're looking for more of a moment in time kind of a thing, when I was 4, my co-host Maurice, who's my cousin, we were at my grandparents' house, and he fell on, or he was about to fall onto the pool that had the cover on it, which I don't know if anybody knows. If you fall onto a pool with a cover on it, you more likely dead.
Yeah, it's hard.
And I grabbed his hand. I mean, he's 4 years old. I grabbed his hand and pulled him out of the water real quick. I've always been kind of a little bit of a bigger guy, so that's probably the most courageous thing I've done. But yeah, I guess the most courageous thing I've seen is the way my mom handled cancer.
That's good. I mean, not good, but being able to gain something from that.
Mm-hmm.
For your toolbox, your emotionally, how you can handle situations going forward and see what people are capable of handling. That's a beautiful gift that she was able to give you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I consider myself a pussy compared to the shit that she's had to deal with. So, yeah, I think it's anybody going through that. It's a tough thing, and just stay positive, and hopefully you do what you're supposed to, and things will work out.
What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
This is probably the hardest question you ask, and I don't know if that's on purpose, if it's because it's number 13 or what the case may be, but from listening to some of your episodes, I think that this is the most interesting question. I thought about it a lot. I couldn't come up with what I thought was a profound answer, so I guess this will just be my my take on it. I think what it means to be a man in today's world is just to be comfortable with yourself in these weird times, meaning being able to be yourself. Like I said, doing our podcast and being myself on the podcast and letting people accept you or deny you, or just putting yourself out there. Because you've mentioned it a couple times, just with media and all these different trends going on, and it's hard to you never want to say it's hard being a man in the world or something like that, because it just comes off wrong and it sounds bad. But I think it's this, men are going through a weird transition right now where this idea of what it used to be a man is slowly dying, I think. What you would, this masculine, brawny guy that shows no emotion, and I think that it's changing on two levels. One, it's changing for men for the better, in the sense that I think this is making us think more. This is helping men examine who they are more in a way, this culture. So it's good in that regard. And I think it's bad in the regard of getting all sorts of criticism. I can't tell you how many times I've seen comments. People have commented on our stuff. I don't want to hear your opinion. You're just a man, or blah, 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 blah. It's like, I'm just doing our podcast and we don't say anything political or anything. So there's no reason for you to get your, to be butthurt about stuff. But I think that I would say that that's probably my answer, is just being comfortable with who you are and just being a good person. I think that's just what it is, because it's hard, because when you're being provoked and shots being taken constantly and stuff like that, I think it's hard in today's world for some guys, depending on your outlook on things.
Yeah, it's certainly an evolving ecoscape for us when it comes to this. But I've always found it funny that people want to criticize, well, like you mentioned, it's hard to say it in such a way that, it's hard to be a man in today's world, but it's hard to be a person in today's world. And based on who we are and, where we are in our life and the place we are in the world, we're going to be affected in different ways. So men are affected differently than women, are affected differently than people in Chicago versus people in Florida versus people in Africa. So, all these things to me, I find it interesting that, everybody wants to put the blame game or, just have some negative view on somebody instead of going, yeah, you know what, we're all messed up.
Well, people are, again, I'll just talk because it's what's relative to me, but on our podcast, we'll do episodes on stuff and it's just people comment without thinking. It's like, we're just putting information out there. And there's some podcasts that are a lot more opinionated than ours, that people love and people hate. And I think for us, I don't want that kind of thing associated with our podcast in the sense that I want people to come to our podcast and not have to worry about politics and not have to worry about being a man or a woman or whatever, floats your boat. I want them to come to our podcast and to just listen to us talk about things that are mysteries to scientists, that are mysteries to, this is something that faces us all. So when you said
we're human beings,
let's our minds
we're human beings, our minds, who we are, that's all that matters.
Right. And that's all we want to talk. All I want to get is what it is. I want to get to the heart of what it means to be a being, to be a person, and that's what I say when I don't want people to come to our show with all these preconceived notions on a lot of these different topics, because I never want to talk about those topics because they don't fascinate me. The thing that fascinates me, again, is why are we here? What are we doing? What's our purpose? Is there a purpose? Are we just energy that just so happened to manifest in this form? Stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's a weird world out there for sure, and I don't think it's any I don't think it's anybody. We shouldn't be criticizing whoever, whether it's men, women, gay people, transgender people. We shouldn't be criticizing anybody. Just be yourself. Do the best you can. Put your best foot forward, and that's it. That should be what it is.
Beautiful point of view. I love it. Well, Mike, that is the end of the 13 questions.
Thank you. Yeah, this was fun and interesting.
Well, it's going to go on. We still have the bonus round, but the first 13. So if you want to stick around for the members section, we can.
No, I got to go, man.
Do you?
No, I'm just joking.
Okay. You got me.
No, but yeah, I'll stick around.
Sweet. Awesome. All right. Well, for everybody else, thank you for listening. Check out the show notes. All right, Mike, you ready for the bonus questions?
Yes.
Question number 1. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
What turns me on creative? Music, certain types of music, Grateful Dead, Fish, jam band kind of stuff, improv stuff. And there's a few different things. I would say meditation to psychedelics, those kinds of anything that there's something nostalgic about it to me. I don't know if it's because I was maybe doing some of these things at an early age, maybe earlier than I should have, obviously, but it puts me in a mood. It takes me to a certain place. And I would say, yeah, that's a certain type of music in altered states.
How old were you when you had your first psychedelic experience?
I've been smoking pot since I was probably 13. Not regularly, probably not regularly until I was like 15 or 16. But and people say, oh, pot is a psychedelic. Edibles are for sure a psychedelic. But specifically psychedelics like mushrooms, acid, that kind of stuff. I think my first psilocybin experience, I was 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's what I mentioned in the first part of the interview, the electric Kool-Aid acid test. But we were into that kind of
like
stuff.
when you were
before.
into it, you were really into it.
And it wasn't a cool thing to be into at the time.
How did you source your own mushrooms? Like, how does that even work as a 15-year-old to try to acquire?
We're friends with a lot of hippies. I don't know if you're familiar with Fish and Grateful Dead and jam bands and stuff, but we.
I wanna Hawaii. I wanna Hawaii. Yo what? 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 I wanna Hawaii. I wanna Hawaii. Yo what?
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo why? I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo why? I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo why? I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo
Why is
why?
there innocent people locked up for life, while some people can't say nothing nice? Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo why? I wanna Hawaii.
Why?
I wanna Hawaii. Yo why? I wanna Hawaii. I wanna Hawaii. Yo why? I wanna Hawaii. I wanna Hawaii. Yo why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.